right, welcome to a brand new episode of the Jake Blanchard Podcast. Man, I've been looking forward to this one for quite a long time. I got a really special guest today. I've got to be honest, without this particular guest, there would be no Jake Blanchard Podcast. There would be a Jake Blanchard who was struggling to get a podcast off the ground. There'd be a Jake Blanchard who would be fumbling on a regular basis to get social media assets out the door and continue to provide the consistency, the branding, all the things that are associated with the podcast that makes it somewhat successful. This guy has been on the journey with me since the very beginning. It's Chance Owen. He's an interesting guy. He's a creative. He's got a lot of stuff going on in his ecosystem, and I can't wait to sit down with my friend here and unpack it all. So Chance, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. It's exciting to finally be on after 101 episodes.
Dude, you've listened to every episode, every single episode of the podcast, probably multiple times in some cases.
Yeah, I've seen the Jake Blanchard podcast quite a few times, once or twice.
Yeah.
So probably I'd like to consider myself the biggest fan.
Yeah, and we're connected in a couple of different ways, and I'm sure we'll kind of weave through that during the start of this podcast. But I got to tell you maybe a story that you don't know to start the podcast, which is how I got an idea in my head to come and to ask you and see what you were capable of doing. So I trained jiu-jitsu under your father, as you know, right? And the recently deceased Keith Owen, which I'm sure we'll discuss today as well. But he was getting his Jeep fixed. He had a Jeep at the time, and it was in and out of the shop. I think it was on a regular basis. I don't know, but he seemed kind of discouraged. It was in the shop a lot.
Yeah, it was in there quite a bit.
So, he goes, hey, at the beginning class, he goes, hey, Jake, he goes, you mind dropping me off at my house after class? He's like, and I'm like, of course, man. And I drive this little, you see my old pickup. I've got a little 91 Ford F-150 long bed stick shift that I like to drive to jiu-jitsu on occasion. And I had driven it that day. No AC. No, I mean, it's hot outside. I think it was in the summer. But I was like, I have no AC, and it's an old beat-up truck that I just like to drive around town. And he's like, yeah, no problem. And he hops in, and he instantly falls in love with it just because he's Keith. And we start talking. He's asking me how I'm doing. I'm like, oh, yeah, things are going good. And I told him I had just gotten back from a conference or a professional development event, and I was getting ready to shoot some multimedia content for a coaching program that I was going to launch in high-performance mindset coaching. And he goes, well, my son, Chance, he does that stuff. Like, he does videos. He's, like, really creative. He's done a lot of my videos here for the studio. He goes, him through the tattoo shop, don't you? And I did. I went to Muse Tattoo to get my left sleeve or half sleeve done by Cody Lee. Fantastic tattoo artist, by the way. Shout out to Muse Tattoo.
Shout out. Very talented guy.
That's where I didn't know you through the jiu-jitsu gym, and we hadn't talked very much, but we had friendly interactions. I said, no, I didn't realize. I knew he would draw sometimes while he was in there. He was definitely a creative, interesting, I wouldn't say eccentric, but you've got some qualities about you that are interesting. And I was like, no, I'll reach out. So I reached out to you the day after. I think I got your number from your dad. And called you directly and said, hey, meet me at Albertsons on Fairview and Eagle. And like within a week, we sat down and I started talking about this whole coaching thing. And then like midway through the conversation, I'm like, oh yeah, and I want to do a podcast too. And then you gravitated toward that as well. And like, man, that was a little over a year and a half ago. But your dad definitely connected us.
Yeah, man, that was August of 2020, was it?
I think so. Yeah.
And to kind of give you some perspective around how that conversation went, you had approached me, right, August of 2020. The weeks leading up to it, I would go out to breakfast with my dad. I'd hang out with the family, right? Every single time he's like, Chance, you need to start your own business. I went, Dad, I absolutely do not want to start my own business. Hard pass. Not for me, right? My older brothers, Alex and Kerrigan runs a social media company, and then Alex is a horse trainer, right? So he deals with 1,000-pound animals all the time. I went, it's great for them, but I don't think I'm a creative. I'm not a business person. I really don't want to go down that route, right? And he goes, all right, well, you'll come around. I go, no, I won't. And then a couple weeks later, you give me a call and you go, hey man, I'm thinking about doing this and I'm thinking about starting a podcast. And I was going, all right, Jake, I'll give it a shot. I'll see how it goes. Right.
You were, I don't want to say that you were non-committal, but you were very honest about where you were in the process, which I always appreciated from the beginning, because I think I was just like, man, I need some logo work and I need some branding work and I need to do a photo shoot and I need some media work and I got to kick this thing off. And you're like, let's just start with like the logo
and we'll go from there. Well, man, so I had worked at Muse Tattoo for probably about, I did the math, 5 years. Didn't expect there to be there that long. Had an amazing time. Learned a lot. Great college level intro to business, right? And we sat down and had that conversation. I was coasting off of my unemployment at the time, and I was having a great time just coasting, playing video games, staying at home. And I just thought, it's great for right now, but what am I doing 5 months from now? And I had to have that honest conversation with myself of like, am I going to be Chance Owen, the creative, the media guy, right? I'm going to do what I'm destined to do, we'll call it. Or like, am I going to end up being a manager at Marshall's?
Yeah.
And I went,
shout out to Marshall's.
Great company, great people working for them. But my dad always said the Owen name means something.
Yeah.
Right. We're all destined for greatness. And I went, I should probably start working on that. Get the ball rolling.
No, it's a beautiful thing, man. And I think it certainly it took us a little bit of time. I went over and got Rob Snero down in California to do the branding for the podcast. And that came in about 10 or 11 episodes in. Yeah. You can remember the first couple episodes where I'm like recording on Zoom. They were quick. I mean, if you're listening to the podcast right now, go back and listen to the first couple. I mean, it's you kind of get some insights to some of my verbal insecurities of just like how to navigate conversations and, really trying to get to questions as opposed to having a conversation. I mean, and that's the whole point of doing podcasts in the first place, is to have, at least for me, kind of a playground in order to explore verbal interactions between people, especially interesting people who have done something or have a point of view about something. But I always found you one of the more interesting people in my circle. And I'm so glad we're finally here right now unpacking that. So you, when did you exactly in that process go, okay, I'm a businessman?
2 weeks ago. It's been almost 2 years now. It was probably around, it was probably a year ago. You had sent me a mutual friend, a chiropractor that needed a job done.
Yeah.
A 5-day event needed 17 videos at the back end of that event. And I started that whole process and I got a deposit and upgraded my equipment. And at that point I went, okay, I have thousands of dollars worth of equipment now. I have a big client coming up.
Yep.
I need to start either shitting or getting. You're a businessman now. And from that point on, there was a big mindset shift that I started. I wouldn't say taking it seriously, but I went, this is my life now. This is what I'm committed to for the long term. And I now have the basis to making a living. And I think that was the biggest thing, is actually generating the income to pay my rent and not have to live. I mean, we're all in the beginning living month to month, but not scrapping for money every month. And I think that was the big mindset shift.
Oh, for sure, man. And now you've got you're doing some interesting stuff these days, man. Let's dive into that right now. Let's talk about Black Badger Media. That's your organization. That's the name that you settled on. I won't want to say settled as in Black Bad. Yeah. But what I mean is you were going. I remember conversations with you about about names of companies, and I loved it the second that you put it together, the second that you put the logo together. So what are you up to these days?
Dude, life has really changed for me in the last 2 years after starting the business. So it took a second to take off, but it led me down some really cool paths. So I worked on 2 feature films in camera department last year, which I never expected. And that allowed me to meet some really cool people here in the film community. And we made some short films together. And because of that, I actually got some funding to make I don't know if I told you this yet, so this might be a fun little surprise for you.
Well, it's all a surprise, man.
So we actually got funding to make 3 short films from now till the end of summer. So I'm going to be making short films for the foreseeable future and expanding my horizons. And I got a film noir coming up that we're working on right now. Then we're doing like a 70s kind of bank heist short film followed by a Western. And it's me and my great friend and main contractor, Mason Dodson. He's leading all the projects, but he managed to get us funding, and we're going to be doing some pretty cool stuff over the next few months.
I saw a post on social media the other day. It was 2 guys with ski masks on like a van, and then there was like a note down at the bottom. It was like just a friendly reminder or something along those lines of like, hey, you should reach out to the authorities before you do some shady stuff on film.
Yeah, dude, that's actually, believe it or not, those are for some TikToks. So we're redoing my friend Evan. He goes by Eshnob. Shout out to Eshnob. You need to check out his music. Very talented guy. And we did this whole thing where he's getting kidnapped on TikTok. So trying to confuse people to see if it's actually real or not.
Oh, sure.
So he gets kidnapped, and then he is in the back of the van singing his music, and then they feed him some McDonald's, and then they lock him in a basement and force him to teach him how to TikTok dance. But that's kind of like and to circle back to the name too. That's why I chose Black Badger Media, because the tagline is media done differently. So I've like to say that the group of friends that I have are kind of the black sheep of the film community. We're not doing your typical stuff, and the name kind of expresses that. So
Badgers are resourceful, man. They're intense. They fight cobras.
They fight cobras.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, they're incredible little animals.
Yeah.
They and it's also one part, not underestimating the little guy, and that's the big thing with badgers is you'll underestimate them pretty quick. People think that they can mess with them, and when you do, you go, "Ooh, that was a bad idea."
Yeah. I love that, man. One of the things that we did, and if you're listening to the podcast but you haven't looked at the series Out Jakes, and we'll get back to some of the stuff we're working on right now, but I want to touch on this, because I was inspired by you when you were talking about like all these different things that you were interested in doing in film and on film, and I was like, well, why don't we come up with like a web series? I've never done anything like this. Like, I need to get comfortable in front of being in a camera. I want to lean into somebody who is a creative and like make something with them and kind of figure it out. Because I see myself as somebody who I would eventually like to be on camera more often. I'm going to be continuing to speak. I do some of that work. I see myself keynoting or eventually, being more involved in the conference circuit. And the sooner that you become comfortable with being on film and knowing where to stand and knowing when to say and like being able to be a part of it, you can make higher quality content. So I was like, well, we should have a playground together, and explore this. And so Outjakes was created. And you made that such a fun and interesting process. So maybe let's talk through Outjakes a little bit.
Oh, dude, I love Outjakes so much.
I love it too. We're on a hiatus right now. And then one, sorry to American Ostrich Farm, because I'm still dragging my feet. The only thing that's left is voiceover, and then putting the final product out there. And I think I've been dragging my feet for like 4 months on that. So totally my bad.
Oh, dude, the voiceover is the hardest part because you're the structural foundation of that whole video at this point.
I know. I just can't find and this is the process for me. One, I haven't been putting enough time into it, so I own that. But two, I don't know, man. There's something about it that I feel like I've done 8 or 9 of these voiceovers already, and they usually came pretty naturally to me. And then this one is just a little bit different. Like I really want to make sure that what I'm saying, it's such a cool video. Like, you know what I mean? I just don't want the voiceover to be lame because there's ostriches all over the place and we're walking around and it's like baby ostriches are hatching in my hands and like it's a beautiful thing. And then like, I don't know, every time I come up with a voiceover for it, I'm like, this is so lame. Like, what am I doing? So that's part of the process. But you always made me laugh. Like we go out to these places and we show up and we're just like littered in tattoos and we're like asking people to fly helicopters and they're letting us. It was definitely a fun series if you haven't checked it out.
Oh, dude, the especially with flying the helicopters too. Like, Out Jake's was fun from the beginning. Don't get me wrong, but like to have built that series up to the point where we could just go to, and shout out to Silverhawk Aviation for helping us out and giving us a free helicopter ride. But to walk in and be like, hey, we do this cool, fun local web series.
Yeah.
Like, we want to do one on your business, and they go, yeah, we'll just give you a free helicopter ride. Yeah. Like, that just screams growth and how far we've come and how much faith people have in us on this one web series.
Well, it's an interesting time too. You know, there's so many businesses that had contracted as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
And like the original premise of that was like to just get out, right? Out Jakes. Like, you know, it's a play on outtakes, but also that kind of that double entendre. Is that how you say it? I don't know how to say that French word, but you know, the other meaning there is like actually like getting back out and trying to, you know, support local businesses and support local causes, or like exploring new ideas. I went to Restore Health and Wellness in Meridian and did the cryo and the you know, got stretched by some guy and like just did stuff that I hadn't necessarily done in order to get a better perspective of like what's available and what's out there. So it was an awesome series to be curious with, and I think one that we'll pick up eventually again. But I think it's got to go through another iteration of like, what is this?
Right.
After I get that ostrich video down.
Well, and dude, if I could just speak from the heart and soul really quick, Out Jakes was really special to me because getting back into business and you know, at that point I hadn't done video tech stuff for, you know, 5 years. I made a couple things for Muse here and there, like commercials and whatnot, but we started at the Botanical Gardens and I was using my dad's old camera and an iPhone, and we were just like, let's figure it out. How do we make a little documentary series with a 10, 15-year-old camera and a 7-year-old iPhone? And it turned out pretty good. But man, it was a couple weeks ago, I sat down and I rewatched all the Out Jakes just to catch myself up. And I had gone through so much growth in those videos because it was the main thing that I was working on for so long. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I rewatched the fencing one.
Oh.
Right? Boise Fencing Company. And I finished that one, and this is super personal, but I had tears rolling down my eyes. Like, I was just so emotional watching that, because that was one of the first videos that I made where I was like, oh, I'm genuinely proud of this.
Oh, yeah.
It's a, toot my own horn a little bit, it's a really good video.
It's a fantastic video, man. You captured the idea of fencing really well. You captured my insecurity around fencing really well. But also, like, you know, I think we had some problems on that as well. Like some of the audio stuff wasn't the way that we wanted it to line up.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. But like the overarching like quality of the camera placement and what the experience that we're trying to capture was like exactly in line with the way you and I had discussed it. Yeah, that was one of the first videos for me that I was like, oh, this thing's kind of spicy.
Yeah, this is kind of fun.
This is fun.
Yeah, and man, what came out? It was the Boise Fencing Company, and then it was Silverhawk Aviation after that one, right?
I think so, yeah.
And then that one, I am just so beyond proud of that one. Granted, you know, it has the coolest shots because we're in a helicopter.
Yeah.
But that one, that was the big one where people were like, "Oh, you made the Silverhawk video?" And I was like, "Yeah, I made the Silverhawk video." And people started approaching me about it and asking about it, and I'd like to say that was another mindset shift for me too, around that point, and going, you know what, hey, Jake and I, we're pretty freaking cool.
Yeah.
We're doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, man. It's when you and I sat down and we talked about doing Out Jakes, I told you I would fund it for like 10 episodes or something along those lines. Like, hey, I'm going to put some money aside. And by the way, like, just so folks know, like, this was like an investment on my end. It's not like I had a platform or that I have a name in the space where my click-through rate generates enough money to justify making these videos. Like, you got to really want to make them in order to make them. So I'm paying, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to have this, you know, whole situation video by video. But every time I would look at the finished product, I'm like, it's getting better. It's just getting better. Like, this is a space I want to play in. And, you know, again, thank you to your partnership through that and being flexible and just having fun with the whole experience. And I know we're going to continue to either do Out Jakes or something similar, but yeah, it's fun, man.
As such, and we'll have to have a business meeting because I have some pretty fun ideas of where to pull that next. So
if you're listening,
cool things are going to happen.
Hey, before we dive too deep, obviously we've got for the Jake Blanchard podcast, there's two companies that I always like to shout out. One is Fuel Hunt. The other is Fellowship Brand. Fellowship Brand makes premium men's grooming products. Tattoo Balm as well. You got a bunch of tattoos, and they just sent me some. So
Nice.
This is just dropping it off to chance as we're in person together. But absolutely love those guys.
Oh, dude, I'm going to use this on a daily basis. Daily care and healing process. Ooh, mango butter. Yeah, dude, I'm a big fan of Fellowship Brands ever since they started sponsoring us and having Diego on the podcast too. He's such a cool and fascinating guy.
He's coming back on.
Oh.
He's coming back on. Lions at the Gate has dropped 3 songs. They're about to drop, spoiler alert, they're going to drop another one. I can't tell you who it's with, but it's really exciting. Sometime in April. We'll see what happens there.
Insider information.
A little insider information. They got another single that's dropping. They got some exciting things in their ecosystem. They're playing their first live show in California. I can't remember where it's at, like CBGB or House of Blues or whatever the heck it's a nice venue in California. I can't remember which one it is because my memory betrays me right now. But the 28th of April.
28th of April.
Yeah.
Mark your calendars, folks.
So, my man, I want to get back to you shot or worked on a thing at the penitentiary.
Yeah.
That I was absolutely blown away by. Like, it's a short film. What's it called again?
Yours truly, Marguerite.
Dude, I remember I was so captivated by this and the way that you guys told this story. Maybe give a background on what the event is, because you guys won some things associated with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a film competition put on by a local penitentiary. So it's called 13 Stories. And what they do is there's 13 competitors, and each person gets an inmate that used to be and live at the prison, right? And so we got this lady named Marguerite Dirk, and essentially she went from abusive relationship to the mental institute, back to the prison, and then, repeat. My buddy Mason, who we've talked about earlier, Mason approaches me one day. Him and I started a weekly think tank, right? Let's better ourselves. Let's work on cool projects. And during one of the think tanks, he goes, "Hey man, I have this short film coming up for 13 Stories, but I don't have an AD. And AD's an assistant director. So they're in charge of building the schedule, managing the set, and in charge of safety on the set as well." And he goes, "Dude, I don't have an AD. Would you like to do it for me?" And it was probably 2 or 3 days before we started principal photography. And I said, F no. Same thing with Boner in a Business. I went, no, that's not the role that I usually fill. I'm not going to be great at that, right? And then the big thing is, I said, I don't want to be the asshole that makes the schedule 2 or 3 days before we start filming, and then the whole thing goes to shit, and then it's on my shoulders, right? And he goes, "Don't worry, man. I'll build it with you. We'll get through it together." And I went, "Fine. Okay, I'll invest in this project," right? Best decision I've ever made. So I met a lot of great friends. They actually were some PAs that worked on the Daily Wire that flew out from California to film it with us. 5 days of just a great time filming. And what we had was this beautiful little short film made by just these incredibly talented people. And we took it to the 13 Stories premiere. And I remember I wasn't feeling super well the day of, so I wasn't in the greatest mood. And I'm in the back of the audience, arms folded, right? Just trying to survive the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
And our short film started, right? And I lean back in my chair and get super comfortable. This is the big premiere. Like I've never shown anything in front of this big of an audience before. And when the film ended, the whole room just erupted in applaud. And it was another mindset shift, dude. Like it was just such a great feeling for people to see something that we made and genuinely believe in it. And we ended up getting first place, which I'm eternally grateful for. And we also got audience choice as well. And I have to admit that was mainly on Mason's shoulder. He wrote and directed it. I threw some creative input when we were struggling a little bit. And then a talented director of photography, Greg but that one video has really launched careers for us. Not that we've, became the most successful people in Boise by any means, but it really showed off what our skill set was. And I can use it to leverage, I got this new office that someone's renting out to me, Bill Doty from Sinistray Creative. Shout out to Bill.
No, this is a fantastic office space right in downtown Boise. Like, it's a super cool little podcast studio in here too. So thank you for inviting me over.
Oh, dude, it's about time we started using this room.
Right.
And so Bill saw it, and Bill believed in us, and he said, hey man, like, we would love to house your business inside of ours and help you get work. And like I said earlier, we got funding for 3 short films because of it. So now we're making a noir and a Western, and it's awesome to see the growth in real time and know what that landmark moment was. And it was yours truly, Marguerite.
That's beautiful, man. Hey, I'm gonna take the opportunity to go back to the conversation you had with your dad around being an entrepreneur. Right? So, I mean, he was definitely pushing in that direction. Do you think he saw you as an entrepreneur in this space? Or do you think he saw you as somebody who just needed to get a business going just because he was such a fan of controlling your own source of income?
Oh, mainly a big fan of controlling your own source of income. That's a huge part. Like, I don't have to go beg anybody for money. I mean, we're all entrepreneurs, so we're all asking for money. But I think what my dad saw in me specifically was not that Chance needed to be a business owner or an entrepreneur, but I think he knew that for me to express my creativity to its full extent, I couldn't do it under anybody else's umbrella. And I think that was a huge thing, was like, maybe business isn't necessarily your skill set, but being creative is. But you're not going to be creative as a manager at Marshall's.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Or it's going to be definitely very difficult. You're going to have to carve that time out. That's hard, working all day and then having the passion project, the second. Like, you've really got to be connected to the why and have like a long-term plan for it replacing the original source of income. You've had a crazy month, man.
Very crazy.
You've had a very crazy month. I think it's important, and if you don't mind maybe talking through kind of how crazy this last month has been for you, and then maybe some of the things that you've learned through it, because I sent you a couple text messages over the course of the month on how much I admire you and admire your strength and admire your perspective through things, and how I've seen you grow so much in such a short period of time. But it's your story to tell. So I'll take a step back here, and I'd love for you to, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, please take us through it.
So, I could honestly, I keep joking that I would make a stand-up comedy routine about it, because I could sit here for 2 hours straight and just tell you story after story of what just happened. But long story short, February 11th, pretty late at night, I got a phone call from my brother saying that I was on a double date, and he had called me saying I needed to get home. There was a family emergency, but he refused to tell me on the phone, right? Sped home as quick as I could from downtown Boise. And
that's got to look kind of weird on a date too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely looked like I was trying to get out of it.
Yeah, you get that phone call while you're at the date. It's just, oh man, I have to go. Yeah.
Well, I run back in. This is a side note. I run back in, right? I step outside to call my brother. He says, get home. I'm not going to tell you why. I said, can you tell me anything? He says, no, you just need to get home. And I walk back in and I go to my date and I'm like, hey, I have to leave. And they're like, oh, what's going on? And I went, I have absolutely no clue. I am just leaving. That's the best I can tell you. I'll try to keep you informed as best as I can. And I was like, Mason, can I Venmo you money? And he goes, no, I'll take care of it. You just go. Don't worry. And I speed home and I get there, and I had called my cousin Hannah she was supposed to check on the dogs while I was gone. And I told her she needs to get home as soon as possible. Don't know why. And I show up and my older brother Kerrigan's there.
Yeah.
And so is his extended family, his father-in-law and their family. And I go, what in the hell is going on here? I run inside and find my brother, and my brother has to unfortunately tell me the news that our father had just passed away. And the difficult part about it, obviously, other than your father passes away, is he was at so my dad's a 4th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You have to call him professor.
No, he is my professor, will
Yeah.
always be
Always.
my professor. I trained under Professor Keith Owen for 6.5 years.
6.5 years. You're a purple belt, right?
Purple belt with a couple stripes on
Yeah.
it.
My dad was with my mom in Brazil at the time at the Pedro Sauer seminar, living the best week of his entire life.
Dude, that Pedro Sauer seminar is something I've been wanting to go to for like 3 or 4 years, ever since I heard about it. And I know your dad had been wanting to go to Brazil the entire time that I've been there. He's always talked about making a trip, like a pilgrimage, if you will, to the Mecca of jiu-jitsu, right? To go train with Master Sauer.
Oh, dude, it was a huge deal for him. And honestly, in this whole thing, that really brought me peace is like, so yeah, he unexpectedly passed, like, I think 2 days before they were supposed to come home. But with that being said, he had the literal greatest week of his life leading up to that moment. We have videos of him teaching jiu-jitsu moves, and like everybody's laughing and having a great time, and you can tell he's working the crowd a little bit.
Oh,
too.
he always did.
Oh, just a wonderful instructor.
Yeah.
But what happened was, and this is kind of a thing, this is going to sound super weird to say, but something that's been talked about on the podcast a lot, especially with the project guys, is kind of having that switch from being a boy to being a man, right?
Yeah, that rite of passage.
The rite of passage. And, especially in America, we don't really get a rite of passage. There's no transition unless you're having like a bar mitzvah, which is unlikely. Like there's really nothing that says like, hey bud, you're a full grown adult now. You gotta act like it.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why Bedros started that Squire program. That's why you're seeing so many folks like Wes Whitlock and Ryan Mickler and other folks that gravitate toward, because it is a formal process in which you have a conversation to say the expectations in which you navigate life, or the expectations that I hold you to as a father, and the way that we work together. That's going to change.
Right.
It is that between that 12 and 15 or 16-year-old, just depending on how mature your kid is. But yes, to your point.
Yeah. Well, my brothers and I definitely got a very informal rite of passage when Alex broke the news to us, because, in that moment there was no. In the initial moment, like I went into shock, as we all would. So did Hannah, and so did all of Kerrigan's family-in-law, and Alex had to go through the difficult moment of having to tell his family what had happened. It was a literal month from the moment I found out that he passed to the moment we got home from his celebration of life, like a literal exactly 1 month process. And it dragged my family through hell, man. It was one of the most difficult things that we had to do, because after the initial shock, there wasn't any moment to grieve. It was, okay, our parents are stuck in Brazil. Dad had just passed away. Mom is having a difficult time communicating. And on top of that, craziest thing, there's only Wi-Fi in the kitchen. So the only way you can make a phone call is in Pedro Sauer's kitchen, right? And we have to figure out how to get mom home to be with her family. And then we have to figure out how to expedite dad back.
And you're timing it around lunch and dinner.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're, I think, 4 hours ahead of us. So they get up, 7, 8 a.m. and it's 3, 4 o'clock in the morning on our time. And there was, yes, time to process it as it's happening, but it was very much like, hey, are you either an adult or you not? Can you do this or can you not? And all three of two of my brothers and I stepped up to the plate, and we had these, we would sit around the kitchen table having these like head of the Owen family meetings of like, what is our next step? How do we do this? My brother showed up the morning after with coffee for everybody and his iPad ready to go. And he said, I've called these 4 people and made adjustments at Team Rhino to handle the next week. I'm flying to Houston to pick mom up tomorrow. We're going to be back at these days. It took 48 hours to get mom back to the States. And then from there, it was learning how to bring dad back home. And then on top of that, the guy was pretty big in jiu-jitsu. I think that we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah, that's no doubt.
Yeah.
He's, the guy was training Brazilian jiu-jitsu in the early 90s,
93.
Yeah. I mean, he was traveling down to Salt Lake City, Utah to go spend time with Master Pedro Sauer, right? And just for folks who don't know, Pedro Sauer is an icon in the world of Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And the stories that I understand is that he actually came to the United States with Grandmaster Elio and kind of toured around a little bit with him and Anibal Lobo. And he was in the uke. He was essentially, Master Pedro Sauer would do moves, Grandmaster Elio would do moves on Pedro Sauer at different seminars and things like that. And then Anibal Lobo would carry the bags, and he's a pretty well-known Pedro Sauer instructor as well. So I mean, your dad was getting it from the fountain, man. From some of the there's a lot of lineage in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Don't get me wrong, but that is not one it's not a bad thing to be a part of the Pedro Sauer Association.
No, and he was a board member as well. They actually made my mom an honorary board member too, which I think is super sincere. And to put it in perspective, I believe Dad had 19 affiliates around the world as well.
Yeah.
And then I actually rolled with Cody Shepard the other day. Cody Shepard's one of my dad's first black belts, or I guess in the top 13. And he had told me that he rolled in Norway, Europe, Iceland, and Brazil, and he has yet to meet someone who didn't know who Keith Owen was.
Oh, yeah. Anyone I've had on the podcast around Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has known your dad. I traveled as a consultant for years and would drop in and to different schools and things like that. And I didn't meet a school that didn't know who your dad was in the States. So, I mean, it was, very cool because your dad put out a handful of very popular videos as well. And he traveled around and just poured his heart into it for 30 years. Man.
Yeah. And what's crazy to me too, I think this is hilarious. Very, very popular man in jiu-jitsu, but every single time that I saw my dad outside of the studio, he was taking a nap on the couch upstairs because he was just working his ass off so much. Like he took the naps where he could. And I'd always poke my head up and be like, "Hey Dad, how you doing?" And he's like, trying to take a nap. And I'm like, "Oh no, I'll talk to you later, bud. Don't worry." But, with that being said, he was so popular in jiu-jitsu that it like, normally when someone's dad passes away, you make an announcement to those you need to make an announcement to, and you kind of take care of the burial and then you move on, but as well as you could. But with us, it was different because he had passed away in Brazil, and then there was a grapevine that came from that. There was information spreading. He had literally just in an instant passed away in bed, and they had to rush him to the hospital. But there was 10, 11 jiu-jitsu guys there. And, Pedro had said, no one say a word, let the family make an official announcement. But within the next day, I'm getting a text message from one Mr. Jake Blanchard.
Oh yeah. No, I texted you. I guess it would have been like 10 a.m. the following morning.
Yeah. And I remember you said, "How's it going?" And I said, and when you texted me that, I went, "Jake knows." Okay. There's no way Jake doesn't know. And, I had said, family's holding strong. We're trying to figure it out, something along those lines.
Yeah, dude. The thing was, I was actually at the school. Todd Richards was teaching he was getting ready to move to Canada, to which he hasn't moved to Canada. I think he decided to stay here, which is amazing to have a black belt at his caliber teaching classes at the school. But he was teaching kind of like like a fun seminar. Here's my favorite moves, those kinds of things. And, we all threw in, I think, $25 or $40 or what, I can't remember what it was, but just to help out with travel expenses going on, that's the community of jiu-jitsu, right? And there was a tournament going on at the same day. And so apparently, the word spreads, right? Like jiu-jitsu, like any other subculture, is got kind of like the sewing circles and knitting circles. Like it's a gossipy and things move fast, especially news like that. So I ended up getting a text message from somebody unexpected, who I love dearly. He's a good friend. But he texted me and he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry. And I'm like, for what? And and we clown on each other a lot. But it took me a second to realize, like, he doesn't joke around in that way. Like, he wouldn't do that. And so I go, are you like, I'm like, ha ha ha, like, don't be a dick, like, whatever. And he goes, no, seriously, man, I'm sorry. And then I was like, oh, fuck. Like, this is for real. Like, and so I step outside the studio, and, obviously when you sent me that text back, we got into contact, and obviously it takes a couple days to process, man. And it's difficult when you don't have control over the information. So I always empathized with your family. I empathized with the situation that you guys were in, and just trying to make heads or tails of the situation. But a great man.
An incredible man. And it really showed. So he always joked that, he was pretty famous in jiu-jitsu, and we knew, like, we had an idea, but like, you don't really, there's not a number that you can put on it. Like, these people know me, or, I've made.
Yeah, it was always that kind of like, it wasn't like he was like bragging about it. He'd just be like, I would ask him to connect with certain like podcast guests, and he was always willing to. I just never really took him up on it that much, but he knows so many people in the world of jiu-jitsu, and so many knew him.
Yeah, and we made that official announcement of what happened, and the outreach was incredible, man. We made a Facebook post on his page, and 900 comments on it, 300 shares, like, people just pouring their heart and souls into these comments, letting us know that, they're here for us and they support us. And it really put into perspective how much impact one guy can make on the world. He was definitely working his way up to being that Mr. Miyagi figure, I'd like to believe.
You know what? And maybe sharing my own personal experience here, I spent, 6 hours a week for 6.5 years with your dad. Okay. And I truly believe this when I say it, is that he was on the Mount Rushmore of men in my life. And I was just a student of his. And I know he liked me, and him and I had a nice relationship and things like that. But like, it was a student-teacher kind of relationship for him, and I valued him that much. And I asked his opinions about things that were outside of jiu-jitsu, just to get his perspective on things. Because there was one thing that I really appreciated about Keith, was the fact that I didn't feel like we had a good enough relationship that he wasn't going to bullshit me about anything. He was going to give me 100% how he felt, even if I didn't like what he was going to say. And he would say it in a way that was sharp enough that you would sit with it. Like, he would just be like, no. He'd be like, oh, wow, okay. There was that. And then also, like, if you put he knew that I was working hard at jiu-jitsu. He knew that I was trying to get better at it. He also knew that I came in and, with probably a little more strength than I should for the art. He's a Pedro Sauer jiu-jitsu black belt. It's about technique. Mm-hmm. Technique is first. Like, it's not about hurting your partner. It's not about being an aggro dude that just like gets to win and all this other stuff. It's like, was the technique perfect? Was it a perfect triangle? Like, what was the angle? Like, how did you enter it? Like really working through those things. And he would get frustrated with me sometimes because I could win against other people, even people that were at a slightly higher belt than me, because of strength and athleticism. And, he effectively threatened me out of his gym once of, hey, listen, like, this was 2 years into my journey. I was just sneaking up on a blue belt, or maybe I'd just gotten it. But he's, hey, listen, like, I had hurt one or two people. And that wasn't my intention, but that was my ego, and it's part of this ego dissolving journey I've been on for years. So it's like 4 or 5 years ago, right? But he really sat down with me. He's like, hey, you got to make a choice, man. There's plenty of gyms that you can go here, and I don't care about the students. Like, of course I care, but they're not my students. So if you want to go to other gyms and they'll put up with that crap, and you want to go hurt other people and do that, like, go do that over there. But like, you're starting to get a track record, and I'm starting to put these dots together, and you're either going to start working from the bottom and start playing on that technique, or you're going to find yourself out of here. And I was like, oh, like, I get it. Like, I'm totally sorry. Like, but he was super stern. And then I said, Roger that. And I gave him a month or two of just like really working on it. And then he came back to me and afterwards, and he's like, yeah, man, hey, like, thank you for making those changes. Like, thank you for doing what's hard and what's difficult. And as an adult, I mean, fuck, I'm a 31-year-old man at this time. you don't usually get people giving you ultimatums and then you like revering them in a way to which you would change your behavior. It's a very special relationship.
Yeah, because man, to me that just sounds like good leadership.
Yeah,
I don't know if you'd agree on that, but like if that was a job that you had, and let's just say you were a manager at Marshall's, and he made that, you'd go, F this, I'm out of here.
yeah, it's hard to take that feedback, man.
Yeah, he was no BS, and man, he was no BS when he was parenting us too. And you know, I would like to think that a good portion of this podcast is about becoming a good father.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd agree on that.
100%.
And man, I'd just like to tell you, and just for everyone listening, the Owen boys had probably the greatest father that you can get. Like, we are so freaking lucky to have that guy as a dad. And I like to tell people that he packed 35 years of parenting into 25 years. And also just to point out, I'm only 25, like having to go through quite a bit of trauma right now. And
you're 25.
I'm 25.
Why didn't I know that?
Yeah, a lot of people, dude, I've been on business meetings with people talking about their videos, and one lady was like, it's great to see good work ethic from people around our age. And I went, how old are you? And she goes, 35. And I went, oh, I am not 35.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was 10 years older than you.
Yeah. I'm a youngin'.
Yeah.
We got very lucky because, with the whole no BS thing, Dad didn't hold our hand on anything. And just like he doesn't hold his students' hands on anything, he goes, I'm going to teach you what I need to teach you, and then I'm going to put it into action, and I'm going to watch you interact with others and see how it goes, and we'll make some course corrections from there. But kind of that 10,000 taps philosophy that he has in jiu-jitsu of you need to fail 10,000 times before you can get good at something. Well, you need to fail 10,000 times at life before you get good at life. And he was very adamant about that when we were growing up of like, no, you made your mistake. Now we have to deal with the consequences. He wasn't going to come in and fix it for us. So I won't go into too much detail, but I got in a lot of trouble when I was growing up. And not overall, just one very specific thing. And I got the disappointed talk, the are you fucking kidding me talk, where it's like, I'm not yelling. I'm just so beyond disappointed in you right now. And then he made me walk through all of the steps to make it okay. I had to pay all of the fees that I had to pay out of my own pocket and work my ass off to pay those at 15, 16. A better example, actually, without having to talk about the legal stuff. My older brother, Kerrigan, when we were really young, we were teenagers, he had some friends that weren't the greatest of friends, right? And very small thing that he did, but they were walking around the neighborhood during winter and they saw someone's snowman. And for fun, they just kicked over this guy's snowman, right?
Oh, yeah. Just being young men with idle time.
Right. And so they beat the crap out of this poor innocent snowman, right? And then they went home and hung out and they were joking about it. And my dad caught wind. And my dad said, oh, no, not my son. I'm calling out my brother on the podcast. Yeah. He goes, not my son. Not going to turn into one of those, right? So he took Kerrigan and all of his friends, dragged him to the person's house of the snowman and knocked on the door. And who answers but the owner of another karate studio here in town. And my dad goes, of course you kicked over this guy's snowman. It had to be one of my colleagues, right? And he made my brother and his friends apologize to the owner of that karate studio. Like, they had to admit that they kicked over the snowman and apologize and do whatever it took to make sure it was okay. But it was such a simple thing that, he made sure that, you took a wrong action and now you have to fix. It's a snowman, yes, but it's some kid's snowman that he put a lot of time and effort into, and you're not going to be the douche that takes that away from someone.
It's an important, in general, and maybe my perspective's changing just because of the side of the table I'm on with my kids, but man, I struggle. It's one of those things where it's just hard to do as a parent, to have your kids fess up to certain things, and you're doing it in their best interests. Of course, I would like to think that I would do this very same thing that your dad did in that situation, but holding that hard line, I think we see less and less, and I think it's an erosion of that moral obligation to society and to your neighbors and to those things that are causing kind of this general distrust in humanity, even locally, with our friends and colleagues and neighbors.
Yeah.
And I think we need more of that. I think it's an important lesson. And your dad was a very principled man.
Very principled.
And I think it comes from a lifelong of martial arts and firearms instructing. And I know he was a reserve sheriff deputy as well. And so he was very much into public safety and individual accountability and individual safety. And it's admirable.
Yeah. Well, and you have to keep in mind, man, and it's hard to speak on this because I actually don't know too much about his childhood. It wasn't something that we talked about often. And what I do know about it is that his dad passed away when he was 4. And he didn't really know the guy. So my dad didn't have a father figure for a decent amount of his life. And it was him, and then he was helping raise his half brother, John. And he had no choice but how to figure it out through his teenage years of like, what does a man look like? How does a man operate? And he got in a lot of trouble. So I've heard, don't know any specifics on it, but he started taking martial arts lessons when he was about 15, 16 years old. And I'd like to think that was the thing. I wouldn't think, I know that was the thing that saved him and made him more disciplined, gave him some sort of path forward. And I don't know about my brothers, but I didn't know who my grandfather was, Harold Keith Owen, on my dad's side. But as far as I've known, Pedro Sauer's always been there. And Pedro Sauer's always been the guy that my dad looked up to and took his life lessons from and learned his discipline from. So I've always seen Pedro Sauer just as a grandpa that I don't see very often.
That's a good grandpa to have.
Yeah, it is a great grandpa to have.
Man. Hey, brother, I could sit here and we could talk forever, I think, on a lot of these topics here. But what I wanted to make sure that we touch on before we part ways is just kind of as you take a step back after the last month. It starts with a phone call and a double date, right?
Yeah.
Find out about your father, and then you're navigating this environment of gathering details and then providing details and then seeing this, having to get his body back to the U.S. And then, navigating different people's opinions and expectations and outreach for hey, we want to help, plug me in, and then having to, try to figure all that stuff out as well. And reflect now, a month later, you had a beautiful celebration of life, a lot of friendly, familiar faces from all across the Treasure Valley and, quite frankly, the country and in some aspects the world. Came and showed up. There's tons of people on that Zoom call as well, watching the service from their various geographies. But as you take a step back and reflect, what's your biggest kind of life lessons, takeaways, these kinds of things?
Well, there's a lot running through my mind right now.
I bet.
My biggest thing lately is making sure that I can heal properly.
Yeah.
Because, I had a month, and so did my family, of having a lot to do and a lot to figure out and a lot of people to contact. And, everybody told me, hey man, when the dust settles, that's when it's going to start hitting you. Which is a weird comment to make to people, but it's true. And the dust has settled, and we buried him, I think, a week and a half ago. And my train of thought over that is, one, figuring out, this is the first death in my life, and it had to be my father, and that's unfortunate, but what's the healing process over the next few years look like, and making sure that's taking priority. And then past that, there's this challenge that I need to start taking seriously, of the long run challenge of making as much impact as my father did. And funny enough, one of the last conversations that I've had with my father was, I was actually complaining to him about some of the stresses of business, right? And becoming a businessman and an entrepreneur. And he laughs at me and goes, oh, I remember dealing with that 30 years ago. And that conversation, I think, started this new perspective of, oh, I'm playing the long game. And that's kind of something that has been on my mind this last month. Is Dad's life was unfortunately cut short. I think 53 is pretty young, in my opinion. And, he had from the start of jiu-jitsu 30 wonderful years to change people's lives. And like you said, the Owen name means something. And that's kind of what I've been holding on to. And I guess my saving grace or silver lining, whatever you want to call it, is Keith Owen passed away, and unfortunately we lost an incredible man. But I think it's the responsibility of the three Owen boys to step up to the plate and be as incredible and as genuine and as caring as he was. And I'm so beyond grateful for the father that I had, and being able to reflect on things that he's taught me in life. And, I made a joke in my speech at the celebration of life. I wish I would have wrote some of that stuff that he was saying down.
Yeah.
So now the biggest thing on my mind is just reflecting over what he's taught me and making sure that I'm as good of a man that he was when I'm that same age, and start playing that long game. And I think that's kind of the thing that's personally been holding me contained. I see, myself included, but my brothers at times are really struggling, as we all should be in this situation. And just trying to be some sort of emotional bedrock of keeping it together and maintaining focus and making sure everybody else is taken care of, with my time to heal and process and whatnot. But
it's a balance, man.
It's a balance. But I'm doing really well, all things considered. And, I essentially acted like Keith Owen that entire time, just making sure people are laughing and smiling and getting through the process. And I think some people have been a little taken back by that, especially at the celebration of life.
He would have been pissed if it was if there was no levity, if there was no joy and excitement. It's, that's what the conversation we had at the jiu-jitsu gym was like we just didn't show up for class. That's the best honoring of Keith is jiu-jitsu living on and the things that he's taught us and the system that he created for the school, and just practicing through that and living through that. If we would have stopped doing jiu-jitsu for a while and then restarted, he would have been like, what, why? Why? I'm not jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is this thing that we all love. Go do this thing.
Right.
And so those were fun conversations in the gym about that. And I think we were all aligned.
Yeah. Well, it's he's up in the jiu-jitsu mat in the sky. Yeah. I like to think, and he's looking down on us thinking hey, I put all this freaking work into you guys. I put a lot of freaking work into a lot of people, and you all need to perpetuate that and carry it on, because, he worked hard for a lot of us, and he made sure that we're the best versions of ourselves that we could be, at least the three boys and being men and everybody else with jiu-jitsu. And his whole thing, a lot of people don't know this, the studio's original name was Super Kicks Martial Arts and Life Skills Academy.
It's terrible name. Terrible name.
But life skills.
Super Kicks.
Fucking
Ultra Kicks. Super Kicks. Mega Kicks.
But life skill was a really big part of that title. And it was making sure if you're a black belt, you're not only really good at jiu-jitsu or really good at karate, right? But you're really freaking good at being a human being.
Yeah.
And perpetuating that mindset of you've earned your black belt in a martial art, but I'm also giving you a black belt in life.
Just a personal story here before we start to wrap up is I rolled with Keith about a week before he left. I didn't roll with Keith all that often. Just it was maybe every 2 or 3 months, him and I would catch each other for a roll, and it was always really kind of playful and flowy. Every now and then we'd, I'd give it a little extra because he was feeling good. His knees were feeling good, everything was going, so he'd give it a little extra, and we had some fun, some really fun rolls. But he, I've been working on my passing and really being more attacking and really light, trying to be really light and loose and just take transitions as they show up. And that's something that starts to mature for jiu-jitsu practitioners into that purple belt type area where you start to find your own game and those types of things. And we were done. Obviously, I didn't even get he just absolutely dismantled me.
What are the odds?
As he should, right? A 4-stripe Pedro Sauer black belt. Yeah, absolutely gonna take me out. But he looked at me and he goes, "That's the best by far that you've ever done." He goes, and like that work, which you just put in, that's that path to brown belt. Like you're on it. Like you're not just sitting as like a blue belt whose belt is purple, like you just got there, whatever. He's like, you're innovating in your own game. It's changing. I'm seeing it. Like you're moving faster. You're framing really well. He's like, you're looking a little brownish. Like he's like, keep that up. And like and this is going to sound really sensitive. I literally cried. Like it was a very, he didn't, for me specifically, I don't know how other people were. He gave compliments like on a regular basis, but he like looked at me. He like locked eyes with me, and he wanted to make sure that I understood what he was saying was coming from like deep within him. Like he's like listen to this compliment. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he was like, he really wanted me to hear it because I think he really wanted me to know, like, keep doing that. Keep whatever you're doing, just keep going down that path. And man, like I said, like 2 weeks later, I mean, obviously, you told the story, but it's one of it's a moment I'm going to reflect on fondly. I think for a very long time. So
Well, and he knew that. Well, one, you know, if your jiu-jitsu is phenomenal, you got to tell people their jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. They deserve that.
yeah,
But also, he knew like there's giving compliments out for the sake of giving compliments, and you know you should be doing that in general. But then there's like, hey, you need to recognize
yeah,
in your life when someone has made such vast improvements, or someone's becoming the person they're destined to become, or you know, we're all on our own personal journeys, and to kind of validate that or give people hope that they've come a long way. Like, I mean, that's what being a jiu-jitsu professor, I would like to think, is all about, is like you're investing so much in all these people and you need them to know that like, hey, dude, you're a fucking badass.
yeah. No, it felt like it felt really nice, especially coming from him. So hey, man, we've gone, I think, well over an hour. Anything else? What are you excited for now that you know the dust is settling a little bit? You've got some amazing things going from a professional standpoint. It sounds like you're putting your hooks into. Like, what are you looking forward to for the rest of this year?
Two big things. One, I'm looking forward to the healing process and getting back in line with what the new normal can be, and living my best life, you know, for my sake and for my father's sake. And as far as professionally goes, dude, I'm ready to just start doing cool shit.
Yeah,
I'm ready to imbue my creativity and everything that I can touch, make the best, you know, products and videos and short films that I can. But like, 2022 is the start of the long game. Yeah. I think is what the last month taught me. So I'm excited for these short films and, you know, becoming the man that I'm destined to become. It's an exciting thing.
I love it. And I know that I'm sitting here trying to wrap up, but something just popped into my head that I want to touch on real quick.
Yeah.
So I had not experienced much loss in my life. And when my buddy's dad passed, like I had a friend of mine, John, his father passed about 2 weeks before your dad passed. And so like I was thinking about death. I was thinking about a son and a father. I loved John. I knew Mike, not deeply, but I would interact with him on a regular basis, and we were fun, and it was friends. And so you're losing somebody that you cared for. And then your father passed, and I was like, I kind of felt it. I kind of felt like the weight on the outside of like really, like this was somebody who was in my life that was very important to me. So I called a friend of mine, Dustin, and Dustin had dealt with the loss of his father in a tragic way. He'd lost, I've known him for 17 years, and he's lost many people in his life in the course of that time. So I called him up and I said, hey, I need some advice. And he gave me some of the best advice that I can ever remember getting. And I'm going to share it with folks now, just in case you've lost somebody. He said, one, and I'm paraphrasing, so hopefully this captures the spirit of what Dustin said, but this is what I took away from it. It was one, there's going to be a hole, and you don't control the size of it. Like, you don't know how big that hole is going to be. and the more expectations that you put around like how big it should be, that's where you're going to start falling into, because you're going to start judging your own experience through it instead of just accepting the fact that there's a hole. And for me, like with your dad, like there was a hole. It was a lot bigger than I thought. You know, I was with him a lot during the weeks, training jujitsu and missing his instruction, and I could just start to feel it. And that hole was like getting bigger and bigger. And I'm like, man, like this is a lot. I think the second thing he said that there's a journey to travel, and that journey is from, it's that sadness and that deep grieving to fondness and reflection. And though that you can reflect fondly while you're primarily sad and grieving, you still have to cross this bridge to get to a point where in life, that healing process that you just talked about, where you're settled and there's some acceptance and there's like a deep appreciation and gratitude for what that person meant for the time that they were there. And then finally, judgment, which this is not a time to judge yourself harshly. It's not a time to judge others harshly or the situation harshly. Like, it's time to step back and open your arms and make extra seats at the table and just love anyone who comes into contact with that individual that you loved as well, even if you don't care for them that much. But if they have that experience, if they had that gratitude or that appreciation for that individual. So those three things kind of, it gave me a perspective that I'm navigating. But I just wanted to share that as well, because it kind of popped up right when you said you're looking forward to the healing process.
Yeah, dude, that really helps a lot because, you know, as the new norm sets in, I have been judging myself pretty harshly. And like, I took the weekend off when I said I was going to come into the office, and I was kind of getting my own ass about it, being like, really, man, you're hanging out playing video games today when you should be working. And I went, dude, come on. You just went through a shit ton of trauma. Like, give yourself a break for one day and just try to relax. So, but now I am back in the office and I got to hit it hard and make something of myself. So it's that balance.
100%.
But that's a great quote.
Oh, for sure. And again, certainly kind of paraphrased it and add my own flair, but it was an important lesson for me, and I'm deeply thankful for Dustin and his perspective there. So, hey man, as we wrap up here, I've got to tell you this, because I want this recorded. Thank you. I am so deeply appreciative of you and all the work that you've done on this podcast. It would not be 100+ episodes. It would not be on the trajectory it is. We're in over 30 countries. We're getting huge regular downloads on both, the listening platforms, as well as, some episodes on YouTube pop off as well. The work that you've put in recently, some of the work that Ian has put in, I am deeply grateful for. And you've done it with an eagerness and an excitement. And to have a collaboration partner to co-create something that's branded in your name, the Jake Blanchard Podcast, but you understand the partnership that you have with another individual to make it happen. Again, just deeply appreciative of you and your time and all the things that you've brought to bear to make the show better in the last year and a half, man. So what an honor for me to get to sit down and have this deeply personal, but also appreciative conversation around our friendship and some of the ways that we connect in life.
Well, now I got to say a big thank you to you as well, because you're the catalyst that pushed me into becoming, my own entrepreneur and deciding to invest in myself. And, heck, you kept me financially stable for a hot minute too, during the literal worst time in human history. So, no, all jokes aside though, I'm very appreciative of you and the relationship that we've grown. And dude, you started giving some of my friends some opportunities to grow themselves, and you've been an amazing mentor and an amazing friend, and very appreciative, very, very appreciative. And thank you to everybody that's been with us along the whole way too. And
100%.
People listening since day one, all that time ago with Type 2 Barbecue and
Alex Gomez. Yeah.
Alex Gomez. Shout out to Alex Gomez. And let's just keep crushing it, dude.
Let's keep crushing it, brother. All right, my man. What an honor. What a pleasure. Hope you all enjoyed the episode, and got a bunch more coming, man. So keep listening to the podcast. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. And check Chance out. If you're in the Treasure Valley, or even if you're not in the Treasure Valley and you want to collaborate, check out that Black Badger Media stuff, man. He's got some cool things going around here. So, yeah, take care.
Cheers.